And we're back. And our final reading for this week is a comic called, Bitch Planet. If you're a fan of comics, you probably know this independent comic. You're reading actually Bitch Planet triple feature. Bitch Planet, of course, was created by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Valentine Delandro, and it's about 4 years old. So, what can I say about Bitch Planet that you don't already know? Well, it's important to recognize that Bitch Planet is actually a parody. It is a parody, and that, of course, goes back to that question of like one of the things that helped define underground comics and their shift towards political and social relevance. It was parody, right? It was parody of popular culture and using that for critique. And so at some level, Bitch Planet sort of returns to a classic tradition of underground alternative comics. It's parody of a very particular genre in popular culture. That is the women in prison genre, which is usually very much associated with an exploitive narrative form, right? And you can see from some of the movie posters I've pulled out here, this is a relatively old genre. There you can find women in prison films going back all the way to the 1950s, but it had a particularly um, subversive and popular moment in the 1970s where you have classic films. I use classic with quotation marks here, Caged Heat or A Thousand Convicts and a Woman. Um, as you can see from these images of those movie posters, Bitch Planet actually is playing very heavily on that iconography, but telling a very, very, very different story. And any sort of like investigation of Bitch Planet as a comic really has to take into account the feminist goals articulated by Kelly Sue DeConnick, who, as I said, co-created this comic with her co-creator Valentino Delandro. And a quick and dirty way to think about the world of Bitch Planet, because at some level it is a world, it's a story world that they've created with the initial publication of the first comic. It's set in a story world that's futuristic, where a group of men hold all the world's power, and they decide that women who are deemed non-compliant through their actions, through their looks, through their sexuality, are sent to a different planet where they're forced to battle each other in a kind of battle royale reminiscent of the Hunger Games. That's a pretty accurate description of the story. Um, Kelly Sue DeConnick is a very prolific and very successful comic book writer. Um, it's important to recognize that she sort of moved beyond comic books, but she made her mark first writing comic books and not writing independent comics. She really made her mark writing sort of like mainstay characters. And in fact, if you saw the Captain Marvel movie, the version of Captain Marvel that you saw on the big screen was really based on the run that Kelly Sue DeConnick had on the character in the 2000s. With Bitch Planet, she's sort of bringing her already established kind of feminist credentials to the fore. And in fact, she has another comic that came out around the same time called Pretty Deadly, that's also a very, very sophisticated feminist take on the Western. And so with this comic, she's really attacking that trope of women in prison and really using it as a way to leverage and attack these questions of patriarchy and sexism through a feminist lens. And indeed, every issue of Bitch Planet isn't this just simply about the sort of sci-fi story that they're telling. It's also a magazine that is giving a platform to feminist scholars and thinkers and really serving as a place of community for the readers. And she herself is very active on social media with her Visible Women hashtag, where she, like Trina Robbins, tries to bring attention to female creators or female identifying creators in comics and other related fields through her activism, like using her platform to bring people into the conversation. And if you're a fan of comics or a fan of feminism, her platform is a pretty big one, and she's been very adamant about trying to do more with her work. So when you're reading Bitch Planet, think about this sort of like through line related to a person like Trina Robinson, who makes this argument very strongly about the contributions of women in comics, stretching back to the very beginning of the sort of like underground alternative movement, which we associate with the sort of rise of legitimacy and the primacy of comics made in America as being a kind of art form that is deserving of respect. And in that narrative, women are somehow left out. And in comics, as you can see from that little clip and from She Makes Comics, there's this idea that women don't have a place in comics. And the reality here, and one of the things that should come to the fore, is that women have always been making comics. They've always been sort of like creative forces that help define comics. And the narratives that they bring to comics have all the same sort of like qualities in terms of like cultural relevance and political satire and creative innovation that you find in the male counterparts. But there really becomes this question of how a kind of patriarchy, just like you see in Bitch Planet, is suppressing their contributions and preventing us from seeing it. And at some level, a lot of the work of contemporary creators is to create a space where women's work can be validated and be seen. And this has been one of the things that's been at the loggerheads of popular culture debates around comics. But as that clip from She Makes Comics makes clear, the fact that we're having those sort of debates actually represents a moment of transformation that is recognizing that there are women who are readers, creators, and fans, and this is creating a new context for the kinds of stories that can be told in comics and the kinds of stories that can define comics in the United States. So thanks.